Good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world watching this today. Thanks for joining today's session. I'm Don Warden. I'm the Director of Incident Response at Cybolt. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk about how AI and other types of telemetry data are helping to reshape how we approach the overall activities related to use of telemetry. I've been in the industry for about 32 years now, and I do this type of work every single day. I'm a hands-on practitioner. I'm not a talking head type of person. So, the items that I'm going to cover today are going to be extracted from my real-world experience and not just something that is textbook knowledge. So let's move on, shall we? So here's the roadmap that we've got for today's session. First, we're going to cover what telemetry means in the context of cybersecurity and why it is so critical in today's threat landscape. Then we're going to talk about the different types of sources of telemetry data, where it comes from, which ones could be most important to you. Then we're going to talk about how to integrate your telemetry into your incident response workflows. And so this is just not about collecting data, it's about making the data actionable. After that, I'm going to share two different real-world case studies from different incidents that I've been involved with, where the telemetry data made a difference between weeks of downtime and hours of recovery. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with some takeaways from the overall message that we'll be talking about, and we'll leave some time for Q&A. So the goal of today's webinar is to allow you to walk away not just with some theory, but with some practical strategies that you can apply within your own environments. So in the current threat landscape, speed is everything. Attackers are leveraging AI and other types of automation, and they're able to move faster than ever. We don't get the luxury of days to look at detection and response. Sometimes it's actually down to minutes now. And traditional IR approaches rely on the manual log pools, tickets raised after the fact, or alerts that have already been filtered through layers of systems. So by the time your analysts might see, this telemetry data, the damage may already be done. So telemetry that we're going to talk about will change that equation. It gives us a real-time feed of the raw signals from across the infrastructure. So instead of trying to stitch everything together manually, we're operating with live data. And that allows us to reduce our mean time to detection, or MTTD, and our mean time to containment, or MTTC, dramatically. So think about it like firefighting. If you don't know a fire started until the smoke alarms go off, it's already too late. You have a fire. Telemetry is like having heat sensors everywhere that allow you to know the moment that a spark ignites, and that way you can respond before it becomes a fire. So there are four critical roles that telemetry plays within cybersecurity. The first one is within the context of continuous monitoring. So instead of looking at snapshots in time, you're building a continuous movie reel of what's happening in the environment. Secondly, the real-time context for alerts. Think about what your EDR agents are flagging, like a suspicious process by itself that could be meaningless, or in a lot of cases, false positives. But if you combine it with other telemetric data, you can see abnormal outbound traffic or privilege escalation combined with it, and suddenly you have a very clear picture that there is an attack that is in action. Third, by bridging the detection and decision making, telemetry is going to be the glue that turns that raw data into actionable intelligence for both the responders and the business executives. And lastly, it enables proactive defense. So with the right telemetry, you're not just reacting, you can actually predict or simulate what you're seeing to prevent the incidents. So in short, the telemetry is what transforms the incident response from a reactive activity into a proactive, intelligence-driven function for your business. So where does your telemetry actually come from? Let's take a look at the top choices. So your endpoints, your laptops, your servers, mobile devices, your EDR and XDR tools, those all capture process creation, file changes, registry activities, all that fine-grained data that shows what's happening at the system level. Next, we look at the network. So the firewalls, your NDR solution, different packet captures that you may have running across your network. Those will reveal how the data is flowing, whether the traffic patterns are normal or if there's something that's trying to move laterally within your networks. On the cloud and software as a service side, you've got stuff coming in from Azure, AWS, Microsoft 365, GCP, a whole litany of different cloud providers. Every platform that's out there generates logs. And if you're not collecting those logs and doing correlation data between them, you're blind to a massive part of your attack surface. Applications and servers. So, think about sysmon logs, SIM feeds, your database activity. That's where the business logic actually lives. And the insider activity actually comes and bubbles up through that surface. And then lastly, threat intelligence. So those are the external feeds that can help provide the context. For an example is an IP address that's going outbound known to be part of a botnet is a hash that you're seeing on your network linked to a known ransomware, TTP. So the key points in all this is that all these telemetry are good, but if you just look at them within a single silo, they have very limited data and very limited value. So the real power is when you're able to take these sources and aggregate them, normalize them, and do analysis together. And that's the only way that you're ever going to be able to see that there are patterns that are emerging that no single tool could ever show. So what are some challenges in using telemetry? First, the volume and the noise. I'm sure anyone that's ever been in a SOC understands exactly what I'm talking about. There's so much volume of data that's coming across. Every day an organization may generate terabytes upon terabytes of telemetry every single day. So without the right filtering, you can actually overwhelm your analysts with too much data. Second, the correlation across the diverse sources. So you have network logs, endpoint data, cloud telemetry. They don't all speak the same language sometimes. So you have to be able to do the normalization of those data. It's essential, but it's often very technically complex to do. Third, skills and automation gaps. Many organizations simply don't have enough skilled analysts or automated playbooks to make sense of all this data that's coming across. And then lastly, retention and compliance. Making sure that you're keeping those telemetry data long enough to be useful while also meeting your regulatory compliance requirements. It can be expensive and tricky. So telemetry is not magic. You have to have a strategy to use it. You have to have the right tools and processes in place, and you also have to have the right people to be able to handle that challenge in telemetry. So how do you integrate telemetry into your IR workflows? This is where the telemetry really proves its worth inside an incident response lifecycle. So for this example, I'll take a look at the NIST IR framework, which most people are familiar with. So preparation, detection, analysis, containment, recovery, and the lessons learned. Telemetry, it plays a role in each one of these phases. So in preparation, you're defining what telemetry sources to collect, how to normalize those data, how to build the dashboards. In detection and analysis, the telemetry is the first line of defense, and it flags the anomalies. It's able to provide you with the correlating behaviors and it also helps you confirm that an incident is actually happening or has occurred. In containment and recovery, the telemetry shows whether your controls are actually working. So putting a system into isolation, did that stop the lateral movement? Did restoring from a backup eliminate the persistence mechanism that a threat actor put in place, etc.? And then the lessons learned, the telemetry gives you data to ask, what did we miss? How can we improve? So all these things have to be taken together as a single function. It's an entire layer that runs across your entire life cycle. So some practical strategies. How do you operationalize this telemetry? So here are 4 practical steps. Number 1, you need to automate your enrichment. So don't make your analysts look up every IP or hash manually using VirusTotal or some other tool. Make sure you've got a SOAR playbook or integration to another system to automatically enrich that telemetric data with the threat intel and the proper context. Number 2, you need to baseline your normal behavior. You don't know what an anomalous activity looks like without knowing what your normal is. So this applies at the user level, the system level, and also at the network level. You need to test. I cannot stress this enough. It's great to have all these tools. If you don't test it works, it's going to be absolutely worthless, because you're not going to know what to do whenever you have an incident that occurs. You don't know who plays what role. I know I handled that. I covered this extensively during the last webinar, but the testing of this is so critical. And it's not just a technical exercise. This is also an exercise for the business. The business needs to be highly integrated into all of these work streams, because you're protecting the business data and you're actually protecting the business. They need to be integrated because they're going to be making important decisions based upon what you see with your telemetric data. And then lastly, you want to prioritize by your risk. Not all telemetry is equally valuable. You want to, prioritize it based upon your threat models. So if you've got a ransomware as a top priority, you need to focus on file activity telemetry and backup system monitoring as an example. So if you take a look at these practical strategies, this is going to help you make your telemetry manageable and actionable instead of being totally overwhelming. So real quick case study on an incident that I saw about ransomware detection. So we had an organization that noticed that they were having abnormal SMB traffic, and they had spikes in different connections between servers that looked abnormal, and between other network devices that typically don't speak to each other. Also, at the same time, the telemetry flagged a certain surge in the file modifications, and it also noticed some encryption patterns. Because they had everything linked together and meshed together, the telemetry was able to be correlated, and the security team was able to quickly contain the affected endpoints. They were able to isolate that network segment that was being attacked, and they were able to initiate the recovery plan. And so this really helped them keep something that could have been quite large into something that was quite manageable. And this allowed them to get back into production within 48 hours of time. Had this gone and spread throughout the entire organization, they could have been looking at three to 6 weeks worth of recovery time, and they were able to get that down to 48 hours because they were able to utilize actionable telemetry data. The second one is an insider threat, and insider threats are actually becoming pretty prevalent within what we see within the incident response practices. It's something that's really tough to control, but as long as you have the right technical controls in place and the right telemetric data, you can certainly do your best at trying to stop this. But in this client case, we had telemetry data that flagged an unusual activity of large file transfers going to an outbound server that was outside of normal business hours. I think it was at 2:30 in the morning, whenever this specific user typically would not be working, to an account that didn't handle, from an account that didn't handle that much data. It was just a second level individual. And it also created some admin account activity anomalies. With that mesh of correlation, the security team was able to notice that this was an insider threat. And because the telemetry was linked together in the SOC workflow, they also linked together HR and legal, called them up, let them know what was going on. The employee was stopped, and the sensitive data loss was minimized. So had this continued on, there's absolutely the possibility that this insider threat could have continued to leak out sensitive data from a business that could have been sold on the dark web, and then the company could have been at risk for this data being exposed to the outside world and facing legal and other types of regulatory compliance problems. So this really highlights that telemetry is about the visibility and the trust, and that you really need to know what's happening inside your environment just as much as what's happening on the outside. So on the lessons learned, what do those stories teach us? First, that your telemetry reduces your time to containment, and every hour, every second matters during an incident. Second, the integration is critical. So collecting logs is just not enough. Correlation across all these multiple sources is where you can start to see insights emerge. And then lastly, telemetry strengthens your executive decision-making criteria. So when you can show your CISO and your board real-time evidence, you gain trust and support for rapid actions. It also allows you to be able to validate spend that you may have requests for whenever you're trying to put together these teams and these tools. So in short, the telemetry isn't just about the technical data, it's also a business enabler. So key takeaways from today: telemetry powers all the modern cybersecurity operations. Number two, you need to know your most valuable data sources and integrate them into your workflows. Number three, look at real-world case studies because they prove that telemetry shortens your detection and it also accelerates your recovery timelines. And lastly, telemetry is the difference between reacting too late and responding in time. So that's the biggest challenge that all the incident responders have and the SOC teams have. Like I mentioned in the webinar, it's critically important for people to understand what the baseline data looks like, number one. Number two, they need to understand what their top risks are. So let's say that you've got 5 different risks that you're concerned about. Let's say you're worried about insider threat problems, you're worried about ransomware, data corruption. As an example, you want to build your workflows and your filtering based upon those risk criteria that you're trying to accomplish. And that's where it ties back into being also a business critical function, where you need to get feedback from the business what's important to them, because oftentimes it really differs from what's important to the IT people. Most of the IT people are going to be more concerned about operational effectiveness, whereas they may not necessarily understand what the context of the loss of a specific piece of data may look like for the business. So you need to take all those things into consideration and allow that to create your filtering. Again, you need to do the normalization so that you understand what your normal is. And then once you have those data all put together, you can start to continuously refine what that process looks like and continue tuning to make sure that you're getting the appropriate data feeds that you need and the appropriate correlation data. Getting a lot of data out of some of the cloud and getting those telemetry is often a challenge. Really the only thing that you can do in those cases that you just need to push those vendors to provide you with the type of data that you need. And I mean, I would go so far as to threaten them and say, if you don't allow me to have the right type of data to protect my data, then perhaps we're going to look for a different provider. I know that's not always a practical solution to do, but given the large attack surface that cloud providers are right now, and the way that they're getting hammered by threat actors, it's really, really important. The one thing that you could do is, make sure that you've got the right correlation data coming from your on-premise or from your user telemetry to your cloud environments, and be able to get some sort of correlation off of how that interaction is occurring, and you can identify the different types of patterns where it might be abnormal. But as far as just coming out of the cloud, if they're not providing you with the right telemetric data, then you definitely should have a discussion with them. Yeah, so the biggest challenge is really in the method that everyone uses. So putting together that mapping of what one type of logging may look like versus what another type of logging may look like is the biggest challenge, and it is a pretty heavy lift on the front end. So spending time to make sure that you've got those data mappings appropriately completed. Again, these are not set it and forget it things, because cloud providers especially are very keen to go and put brand new functionality without necessarily notifying people. So you may have expected to have a piece of telemetric data that may be in third position. Now they've added a new field, and now it's in second positions, and then it throws off everything that you have in your data feed. So you need to be continuously looking at those types of things to identify. I mean, it is a challenge up front, but once you get it going, it's really easy to continuously tweak that up to get to a point of normalization. One of the biggest challenges, especially if you look at telemetric data that comes out of EDRs, are when you have threat actors that use, living on the land strategies, where they might be in dwell for a while, and then they're using legitimate PowerShell scripts or other types of built-in tools to do data exfiltration or even do reconnaissance work. You're not going to be able to get everything 100% of the time. What's important is that whenever you're just left a boom, that you can start to see the different spikes in activity that the threat actors are going to start ramping up prior to execution of an attack or an exfiltration event. That's where it's critically important. But there is no silver bullet that's available that's going to allow you to be able to determine. You just have to rely upon your baselines, and then just look for that sudden spike, because it always happens. So again, I would go back to, what is your risk tolerance? What are the top 5 things, for example, that you're looking for to prevent attacks on? Obviously, everyone's answer is we want to prevent all attacks, but that's not a reasonable activity, or else you'll be like a dog chasing its tail, and you'll be in the same position that you started with, where you're drowning in data. So you need to make sure that you build out your playbooks and your SOAR to be able to take a look at the top 5 things that you're working at or looking at as an example. Obviously, you could use more than 5, but 5 is a good number to start with. It's manageable. Obviously, everything is important. If anything falls out the bottom of those 5, then they certainly need to be looked at too. But you need to have prioritization of what's important to your business within those top 5 playbooks. So I think if you haven't had an incident, then if you've had an incident, it's certainly easy to get those cost justifications. And if you've had the unfortunate time of dealing with an incident, make sure that you utilize that time to get what you need to do for your business. But otherwise, I think you just need to show them that you do have rich data that comes from the your MDR, XDR platforms that feed into your SIM tool, and that those extra amount of telemetry data really help with the speed and allow you to stop events faster than if you did not have it. The other trend that I'm noticing right now is specifically with like the top 3 XDR vendors, is that they are spending a lot of money on LLMs and other types of AI, along with SIM type tools, to where they're all working towards providing that SIM functionality. They're also starting to take a lot more external feeds from firewalls and other types of sysmon tools, so that they can provide the correlation data within the actual XDR environment itself. So it may be one of these things where you may have to just kind of wait and see, and you may find that what one of these XDR providers have meet or exceed the requirements that you have for the SIM tool that you have in place, and you may end up finding that cost is less, and you've got a more efficient single pane of glass, which is what everyone is trying to get to. And tools that are going to do pre-cleansing of your data before it hits your data lake or your SIM is a really good idea. Again, that's one of those things that you're going to have to continuously reevaluate and adjust based upon the threat profile that your business has at any given time. Obviously, that's going to change. Right now, we're in a kind of a time where phishing and other types of human-based attacks are at an all-time high. So it's critically important that you might prioritize those types of data on, let's say, messaging as an example, or what your messaging provider may provide, whomever that may be, with respect to what types of messages are coming in, and you can see different types of patterns, to stop and reduce those types of attacks within your environment. But I think that doing some pre-cleansing is certainly going to help with your overall cost. It's really expensive to have a cloud-based SIM tool. It's really expensive to go and put your data into, let's say, Snowflake, and then do the manipulation of those data up in there, as an example. So doing a little pre-cleansing ahead of time can certainly sharpen the sword of your SIM tool, and it's a really good idea. So with the introduction of Gen AI, really what that does is it increases the velocity of the overall attack chain that a threat actor may use within your environment. So it's critically important that whatever data lake that you rely upon, or whatever SIM that you rely upon, and whatever XDR, MDR that you rely upon, also have similar type functions. There are also other types of automation using artificial intelligence that you can use within the environment that help enrich those types of activities. I encourage you to go onto YouTube. I did a couple of different series of webinars about this and how to utilize that both on the offensive and defensive perspective. That way you can test and then also defend. But that is that's a big challenge right now. And I think that there are a lot of SIM tools that are struggling to keep up with it. It's not an impossible task. We're always going to be, what we say, a step behind the threat actors because they have a lot more time and a lot more money and a lot more scale to be able to utilize those tools for their nefarious means versus a lot of us in the real world that have limited budgets and very focused amounts of human resources available. But it is doable. Again, if you've got a SIM vendor that you're using and they're still stuck in the old world, they're quickly going to become a dinosaur because they have to be able to provide those types of rapid services using similar types of technology using Gen AI. I think what you need to do is take a look at both your internal data and take a look at what the industry standards look like. Using some of the well-known Gartner as an example, and other types of research firm data to help bolster what you're seeing within your environment to help you get the type of money that you need to do what you need to do. This has been a really classic problem within the security world for a long time. I think that the increasing prevalence of cybersecurity attacks across all the different surface areas, we're under current, constant attack, both from the government level all the way down to the small mom and pop business today. And a lot of these events come out in the news. I think that the challenge is that a lot of it is seen as noise. We see so much of it is happening so rapidly right now that people that are in business may not necessarily understand how this can affect their business. So you'll have to work together with your CISO and with your CFO. I can assure you that the CFOs understand what the risk is and understand financially what that means for the company should something happen. And put together a strategy that you can take back to your board of directors and show the business impact of an event. You could use real world data on your business. Your business knows, your CFO should know what you all are able to accomplish from a revenue perspective on a per day, per hour basis. You can talk to them about what it takes on a specific type of attack that may take 2 hours, and this the cost of recovery for that is X number of dollars. If you're down for a day, X number of dollars a week, etc. Depending on the type of attack and how serious it is. So you definitely have to join together with someone with the business to help anchor that messaging back to the boards. You have the MITRE attack framework that you can use that is some sort of normalization of the data and the different types of attack patterns. But as far as like at the base level for our YARA rules as an example, but as far as a baseline of the type of data that comes out and what each one of those different silos map to, nobody yet has put all that stuff together. The best you can do is to try to piece together, if they're able to go and do the YAR rules and do the, map into the MITRE, those are good ways to start if you can't get that mapping that I was talking about together to where you can match up those different types of data so you can get better correlation. Well, the first thing is you need to understand what your regulatory compliance obligations are. So obviously, if you're within healthcare, you're going to have HIPAA requirements, which are 7 years. If you're in financial services, you've got a different set of time. You just need to know what your baseline looks like. And that's going to allow you to be able to put together what those costs look like, what it's going to cost us, and be able to report that back to the business on what your annualized cost is going to look like to be compliant within your specific industry. I covered that on a previous webinar as well. So we should never rely upon AI as the 100% be all end all. There always need to be guardrails in place. There always needs to be a human that is there. So it's important for you to come up within your playbooks different types of checkpoints where you want to make sure that there's a human that's involved. Let's say, for example, that AI goes through, does the analysis of those data, and you get to a gate within your SOAR that says, okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to do a rollback on all the data using the XDR function. That's a pretty big thing, right? You may not necessarily want that to automatically happen. There may be, let's say, a database server where you have millions of different transactions that are coming across within a 10-minute time frame, as an example. You may not want that to be rolled back. You may want to make sure that you've got human intervention that's occurring to make sure that is it is what the AI says it is. AI is not perfect. AI is only as good as the data that you train it on, and that you're continuously tuning your AI. The second example I would look at would be, let's say AI says that it's time for us to shut off an entire network segment. Well, the AI may not necessarily understand what is involved in doing that, what the critical functions of that specific network segment may be. Let's say that it wants to shut down the network segment that runs your main e-commerce site, as an example. That's definitely an area where you want to make sure that a human is involved and that there's that checkpoint and guardrail in place to where they say, yeah, we really do need to take down the e-commerce site because we do have a problem. So those are the types of things that I would look at on how you would make sure that you're not just letting AI run wild throughout your environment. Just make sure you have those guardrails and checkpoints in place where the humans are able to check the important functions. It really boils down to making sure that you understand what the business priorities are and that you're constantly evolving. You're going to spend a lot of time up front, as I've explained, putting together your different playbooks and understanding what telemetric data is important to you. You need to do reviews of that. It's going to vary between what your company has as objectives as to whether or not you have a monthly review of that, a quarterly review of that, annually, et cetera. But you definitely need to review those. You also need to do auditing internally of all of those data to make sure that you are actually getting what you think you're getting. Oftentimes people set it and forget it, and they're not getting the type of data, telemetric data that they think they're getting. So incorporating those types of feedback loops into your overall process is critically important. I think there is going to be an acceleration over the next 3 to 5 years, especially as we get to a convergence point of agentic AI, and then also, whenever we have higher computing power coming out of quantum computing realm, that's going to be absolute game changers in the speed and the velocity of attacks, and also the speed and velocity of the defense. So those are going to be critical over the next 3 to 5 years. So it's important to make sure that you've got those types of alerts that are available within your cloud-based environments. A lot of times in Microsoft environments, as an example, we'll set up what's called impossible travel alerts. So for example, let's say you are in New York City, and then 5 minutes later, there's a login that's trying to occur in Prague. Obviously, you didn't get from New York City to Prague in 5 minutes. So, setting up those types of parameters is critically important. Doing blocks out of specific countries just doesn't work anymore because of VPN utilization, right? VPN utilization also causes other headaches. You get end users that might use different types of VPNs for whatever reason, privacy, let's say they're at a coffee shop and they don't want to be on an open net and have their data potentially exposed. Those people pose a huge challenge to us on false alarms because they may try to go through Switzerland or wherever else, and they think is going to make them safer. So it's really important. The impossible travel piece of it is really important. Having telemetric data coming out of your cloud-based environments where you can, that show those differences in where you started and where you came from. That's a critical point. But you've got to feed all that stuff in, build out those rules that say, okay, if the user says they're in New York and within a reasonable amount of time they show up someplace else, that's probably not correct. One thing I'll leave everyone with is to make sure that you're constantly reviewing where your telemetry data lives and ask, is it just a silo of data, or is it feeding directly into your incident response pipeline? Making sure that you close those gaps is one of the most efficient ways for you to be able to strengthen your resilience without making any major investments.